Hi, I'm Jack, and I'm going to show you how to build a fitted wardrobe like this with only basic tools and no experience for less than 400 quid. I know that might sound like quite a claim, but you've got to trust me that it's entirely possible, because my first woodworking project was our own fitted wardrobe. All that you need is some clever planning, 3 to 4 power tools, and a lot of patience. Obviously I made loads of mistakes along the way, but it turned out great and is what kickstarted my love of DIY. The wardrobe that I'll be walking you through follows a very similar build process to the first wardrobe that I made. It's got a stud framework and faker-shaker MDF doors that are really easy to make. Without wanting to get too emotional about a wardrobe, it felt so rewarding to have made it from scratch, and we saved between 2 and 3 grand in the process. In the 4 years since, I've made loads of fitted furniture for our own home as well as for other people, which I couldn't have done without the awesome content that other YouTube makers put out. I've tried loads of different methods for the internals, the doors, the profiles, so this build is a combination of the most affordable and simple ways to build a handsome and functional wardrobe. So in this detailed series of videos, I'm going to help you novice DIYs get comfortable enough to take the plunge and commit to making your own fitted wardrobe. So here's what each video in this series is for. First up, we've got planning. In this video, I'll take you through what tools you need, how to design your wardrobe, key dimensions to bear in mind, and then how to go about ordering your materials. Then it's on to framework and shelving, where I'll show you how I put the framework together and slotted the shelves in. The next video is about doors. I'll show you how to assemble your doors and add your hinges before fitting them to the framework. In the last video, we'll look at final touches, where I'll guide you through how to fit bits of trim around the doors and all the other little jobs before you can stand back and admire your work. What makes it possible to build a bespoke wardrobe with limited gear, limited experience, and for not much money is the construction method. The way that joiners or fitted furniture makers will usually build a wardrobe involves assembling individual MDF carcasses and then fitting mortise and tenon or loose tenon shaker doors, also made out of MDF. This is how I make most fitted furniture, so it's not unrealistic for a keen DIYer. But if you're starting out, then it's probably not for you, especially if you don't have equipment like a router and a table saw or a track saw. Instead of MDF carcasses, this method uses stud work that's normally used for partition walls to provide a frame. These are attached to the walls and ceilings with wall plugs and joined together with pocket hole screws. Don't worry if you don't know what these bits are, because I'll clear all that up in the framework and shelving video. And instead of loose tenon doors, these are made using the faker-shaker method, which is much more simple. This ultimately involves gluing one piece of MDF to another. Again, I'll go into more detail in the doors video, but to give you a brief idea, the doors that I'm going to be making here are 6mm rails and stiles glued onto a 12mm backer. I honestly think that these two changes involve barely any compromise versus what you'd pay someone £3, £4, maybe £5,000 for. If you're an experienced DIYer and want to make a wardrobe like the professionals would, I've got a separate set of videos which are well worth a watch. I'll add a link to these videos once I've got round to editing them. I'm sure that a lot of you are dubious about not needing loads of fancy power tools to build a bespoke wardrobe, so let me give you full disclosure. Power tools obviously can help you improve speed and accuracy, but they're expensive, and more often than not, a very similar level of finish can be achieved without breaking the bank. Speed was important for the wardrobe that I'm building here, but I've made sure to let you know how I would approach each step when I made that first wardrobe with very limited kit. There's definitely a baseline of power tools that you'll need to make your own wardrobe. On the left hand side of this table, you've got the tools that I wouldn't recommend trying to complete this project without. You're going to be drilling plenty of holes into walls, ceilings and wood, so a combi drill is absolutely essential. An impact driver is also key to make sure that you've really driven screws home. If you're feeling really brave, you might attempt to build your wardrobe with just a handsaw, but I wouldn't recommend it. A miter saw will ensure that you get really clean, accurate, consistent cuts that are always at 90 degrees. If there's one item on the essential list that you could compromise on, it's the jigsaw. But to get that truly fitted finish, there's no real alternative. Moving on to the ideal bits, my route was my favourite power tool by far. It's so versatile and gives you instant results. However, unless you're a keen woodworker, it's something that you might not use for months at a time. The main use of a router in this project is to put a chamfer all around your doors. As you'll find out in the doors video, you can do this by hand, but it just takes a lot longer and isn't quite as accurate. Power sanders come in really handy in all sorts of DIY jobs, so you might already have one. Its main use in this job is for sanding down the filled edges of doors, that I'll explain more about in the doors video. The multi-tool is probably straying into luxury territory. It's only of use if you're taking a certain approach to your profiles, but again, I'll explain that in the final touches video. And finally, the luxury bits. For me, these are power tools that I've only been able to justify because of how much woodwork I do. You'll see me using my nail gun in the doors video in particular, which I use to quickly pin the rails and stiles down to the 12mm backer. It's a total luxury because obviously you can just put the nails in by hand. As for the track saw and table saw, these come in handy when you need to make really long rip cuts, but if you're getting all the wood cut for you, you won't need these at all. I don't even have a track saw, but it is next on my list. I've just had a look on Screwfix and you can get all those essential items for 320 quid, the ideal for a further 176, and the 3 luxury bits for 370 quid, which comes to 866 quid if you wanted to go mad and buy absolutely every single one of those tools. If I was starting out again, I'd focus on getting those 4 essential tools and treat myself to a router. Obviously, you might just decide that saving thousands of pounds on making your own wardrobe can justify buying loads of power tools. Okay, so when it comes to design considerations, there's 2 key questions that you need to answer. First of all, how do I want the wardrobe to function? And secondly, how do I want it to look? From a function perspective, what are you going to be using the wardrobe for? If you're going to be using it for lots of dresses, then a rail with loads of hanging space is key. Whereas if it's going to be used for things like pants, socks and t-shirts, then shelves is probably more important. If you've got shelves, then it's really important to think about what sort of weight you're going to be putting on them. If the shelves are made out of 18mm MDF and you've got a span of over 50 or 60 centimetres, then you're going to need to consider supporting the shelf at the front and the back ideally, rather than just the sides. Have a good browse of wardrobes online, or even better, actually get out to furniture shops armed with your tape measure. When considering the aesthetics of your wardrobe, it's well worth having a good browse of Pinterest and Instagram for inspiration. The beauty of this method for making doors is that you can make them look pretty much exactly as you want them to. You can go for a classic shaker look like I am here, or make it more traditional looking with some moulding. To keep things really simple and minimalistic, you could just use an 18mm slab of MDF for the doors. I tend to stick to a few key dimensions for wardrobes where I can. 60cm is a good internal depth. This allows for shirts and dresses to be hung sideways. The gap from one shelf to the next, somewhere around 30cm should be about right. As for hanging, if it's for shorter items like shirts, 90cm should do the job, whereas for longer items I usually go for around 150cm. Moving on to doors, somewhere around 50cm is good for door width. Any bigger and it starts feeling a bit like a barn door, whereas any smaller and it looks silly. Your profiles are the lengths of MDF at the left, right, top and bottom of the wardrobe that ultimately make it look fitted. I'd suggest factoring at least 5cm at each side of the wardrobe run to make sure that the doors can open fully. In my opinion, anything over 10cm starts looking a bit cheap and is just wasting space. I'm going to assume by this point that you've got a good idea what you want your wardrobe to look like and how it's going to function. So now it's time to measure up and get designing. Obviously all you need is a tape measure, but a laser measure will come in really handy for quite a few different stages of this project, so if you've got 20 quid spare it is worth shelling out. As well as jotting down key measurements, be careful to make a note of any obstacles that you may need to work around. So as you can see for this wardrobe there was quite a few. I had that hatch on the left, had the chimney breast, and also there was a plug socket to work around. I designed my first wardrobe on paper, and while it worked out fine, it took me absolutely ages to get my head around 3D drawings. I've since started using SketchUp, which is a design software that has a free version, which has made planning projects 1,000 times easier. There are loads of benefits, including the ease of making changes, the fact it provides a full 3D view, and that it will help uncover potential problems far easier than if you were designing on paper. It might seem daunting at first, but you honestly don't need to spend more than 2 hours watching YouTube tutorials to learn enough to use SketchUp to design your own wardrobe. I've linked my favourite tutorials below. Once you finalise your design, you're about ready to go. There's just one more key step. Assuming you don't have gear like a track saw, circular saw or table saw, you'll have to plan your cut list really thoroughly. I'm recommending that as a minimum you have a miter saw, which can only really be used for cuts up to 30cm deep. Anything longer than that and you'll have to make sure that the work's already done for you. That's where using a cutting service comes in really handy, and it's what I still use today. I'm really lucky in the sense that I can borrow my dad's trailer to get timber home, but I know that most people don't have that luxury. Fortunately, there's loads of websites where you can get MDF cut to the bespoke sizes that you need. I've never used one of these websites before, but I do know that it usually works out as more expensive than if you bought the full sheets and cut them yourself, or if you got them cut at a place like B&Q. So if cost is important to you, maybe take some time to weigh up the prices of ordering the MDF cut to size through a website versus an in-person cutting service, versus of course buying the timber as full sheets and having them delivered home, and using the money you've saved to buy a track saw and do the work yourself. There's always a good excuse for a new tool. If you're getting it cut at the likes of B&Q or cutting it yourself from a full 8x4 sheet, I recommend using an app or a website like Cut List Optimizer. This allows you to input the dimensions that you need, and the program runs calculations to work out the least waste, which can make a big difference to the cost of the project. Just to be totally clear, this is not a part of the process that you want to rush. The last thing you want is for your door and shelf material to arrive before realising that it's cut to the wrong dimensions. For the stud work, it's really important that you're able to pick this out in person. Unlike the MDF, the stud work is real wood, which means it behaves like real wood. You're going to get contraction, expansion, warping, twisting, cupping potentially. You're also more likely to find damage and sap seeping out of the wood. So make sure that when it comes to the stud work, you go and pick that out yourself. I can fit quite a few dents into my medium-sized car, so you might be surprised what you can get into yours. This might feel like a lot of work before you even made your first cut. Yes, it's going to take more time up front, but you'll make that back and it's going to save a whole lot of stress and cost. Okay, so at this stage, your design's finalised, your materials are ordered, you're ready to go. The next video is going to be all about how we kick off the build process with the framework and then the shelving.